Welcome to Spotlight ETSU. I'm your host, Carrie Oliveira. Today, we are going to do two guests. Today, we're going to talk about gender and sexuality. So our first guest is going to be Kate Emmerich, who is the coordinator of the OASIS program at the Counseling Center. And we're also going to be talking to Max Smith, who is the president of ETSU's Feminist Majority Leadership Alliance. So many syllables. We're going to start with Kate from OASIS.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi, Carrie.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So,
sorry, Carrie.
So you're totally fine. It happens all the time. What does OASIS even stand for?
OASIS stands for Outreach and Advocacy, Sexuality Information for Students. It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, which is why we call it OASIS.
Yes.
And that acronym is not an accident. We were talking about before we started shooting. An OASIS is a safe place to be,
yes.
right? And so,
yes, so it is not an accident. And so the reason it has that name is because we are the on-campus sexual assault and relationship violence prevention program. But we take a focus on educating and outreaching about healthy sexuality and healthy relationships as a method of preventing assault and violence.
When I teach relationship classes, so I have an enormous appreciation for teaching people skills to be able to function well in their relationships as a way to mitigate bad things that happen.
That's wonderful.
It's amazing what knowledge and education will do for people. I mean, really though,
absolutely.
Right? So what kinds of things do you educate people about?
We educate people about all sorts of things having to do with sexuality, sexual activity, and relationships, and healthy methods of practicing those things and unhealthy dynamics that occur when people don't have formalized education or education at home about these things.
Do you find that people have generally misguided ideas about what constitutes healthy interaction in their intimate relationships?
Oftentimes, yes, because as a culture, we tend to not talk about these issues.
That's true.
We think of it as private interactions, as a private topic, and so a lot of people feel very uncomfortable breaching that topic. But the problem becomes everyone is engaging in relationships and in sexuality, and so it's something people are doing, but then not talking about. And because there are so few forums where people can comfortably ask questions that they don't know the answers to and admit to things that they might feel judged about, it's very difficult for people to know what the difference between.
So how do you get students to come in and talk to you about these things in order for you to provide opportunity to educate them?
I force them.
I ironically drag them in violently.
Yes. No, we don't encourage violent dragging. But I go into classrooms and into residence halls and into different groups on campus, and I talk to them really frankly about this stuff. So I do have some formal presentations that center more specifically around sexual assault, relationship violence, stalking dynamics, and the really important issues that college students especially need to understand what these things look like versus what people imagine them to look like based on watching things like Law & Order SVU, because it's very different.
Right, and so I mean, coming from the communication department, we know that media consumption tends to influence the way we perceive reality.
Yes, absolutely.
Not only in terms of what happens and what's normal, but also how the legal process works and whatever else. And so I imagine that frustrates people when reality doesn't quite match this fiction.
Absolutely. Well, and it surprises people because they end up in situations that they don't realize even constitute things like sexual assault or relationship violence or stalking based on what they think they understand because of the media and because of just general
I would venture
culture.
to guess that most people think that any sort of relationship violence has to be extreme. There has to be injury and you have to hospital visits and whatever else. And most of it is not that. What is most of it?
Well, it can lead to that, but most of the time, of course, it doesn't start like that. You would never go on a second date with someone who makes you feel terrible about yourself and hurts you. So so a lot of the presentations focus on the dynamics of a violent relationship and focusing more on power and control dynamics as opposed to necessarily being punched or hit. So things can start very small and then escalate from there. And sometimes people don't realize that what they're engaged in is an unhealthy relationship that involves acts of violence that aren't necessarily physical.
If you could alert the viewing audience to one or two things that they should be careful to look out for in their relationships is a precursor or the one red flag they should be paying attention to as their relationships are kind of moving in the wrong direction, what would you point out to them?
I don't think that there's necessarily one specific one. There's something called the power and control wheel, which I encourage people to, you can literally Google image it and there are just tons of them come up. And it shows all these different dynamics that constitute different red flags that you can just look for early on in a relationship. But just a couple quick ones are if someone is wanting to move really quickly, wanting to settle down really quickly, it seems like a real whirlwind. People can get confused because it's a cloud 9 phase and you're really excited and happy.
And it's very consistent with sort of like our fairy tale scripts or whatever else, which is we buy into to a shocking degree.
Absolutely. So as with any sexual interaction and relationship interactions, you always have the right to slow things down.
Right.
You always have the right to set boundaries and say, this is where I'm comfortable right now. And if the person genuinely cares about you, then they will, of course, respect that.
And so that's really what the thing is that am I allowed to express my needs in the relationship without feeling belittled or controlled or anything like that?
Yeah.
Which, sometimes it's hard to see.
Yes.
And so
Absolutely.
part of what your training does is not only alert people to the sorts of things that they should be looking for, but also ways to kind of mitigate those problems.
Absolutely.
So is that what the training is designed to do?
Yes, and so we are very equal about how we talk about these issues. Sometimes the reason we don't focus solely on getting up and just talking about, we need to prevent sexual assault and we need to prevent relationship violence and these are the people who are doing it and these are the people who are the victims. Right. It creates a dichotomy, it creates a gender dichotomy. Yes. And though the statistics do show that for the most part, men perpetrate violence in our society generally, and for the most part, statistically, women are victims of that. It has a lot to do with, as a culture, how we are raised to be women and how we are raised to be men, what those expectations are. Our focus is more on bystander intervention. I don't know if you've heard of that, but the concept of, if you've ever heard of bystander apathy or the bystander effect, the more people who are around when a situation happens, the less likely it is that any single person will actually act or do something to change it.
There was that case in New York.
There are lots of so many cases,
like that,
right, where many people witness a violent crime and nobody calls 911 because everyone is assuming that someone else is going to do that. Right. So what our focus on is everyone taking responsibility. It's no one gender's responsibility. It's no one person's responsibility. It is a community responsibility to start from the ground up in addressing these issues and creating an environment and a community that does not allow gender violence, does not allow misogyny and objectification and degrading to happen. And so what we ask of people is that, which it takes a really brave person, is to step in when you hear someone make an inappropriate comment, when you hear someone say something about getting someone drunk so that they can have sex with them, things like that. These things happen in college.
Yes, they sure do.
And people don't know how to react to that, or they react the way that they think that they're supposed to react in order to be accepted into their social group,
like,
in order to be accepted into the...
super funny and way to go on...
Right, or they just don't say anything.
Like,
Right, absolutely, or they stay silent, which is complicity.
Right, it's like I'm basically telling you, oh yeah, I'm good with that.
Right.
Without saying
that, absolutely. So it takes a lot of risk, and it takes a lot of bravery, but that's what we are asking of people. And so we are trying to bring that focus especially to leaders in our community, to leaders in our campus, because they have so much more influence on others around them. There are people who look up to them.
Right.
So we are really looking to train and educate leaders and bring them into the cause so that they can disperse this information and create that change.
So you have
in
a
the
leadership
culture.
training program, effectively.
Well, so basically this event, I'm just going to jump to.
I was going to bring it to that anyway.
Sure. So Take Back the Night is coming up in the beginning of April.
Right.
And the biggest event we have this year.
That always corresponds with Relay for Life, I feel like.
Relay for Life is now at the end of April, so we don't have to worry about that.
Check.
So that's good. And we used to have a 5K, and so this year, in place of that, we are launching Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, which is the International Men's March Against Rape, Sexual Assault, and Gender Violence.
The International Men's March Against
Rape, Sexual Assault, and Gender Violence.
That is so many words.
I have to memorize so many,
all of these
so
things.
many acronyms.
Really, it's like don't be a jerk. Ultimately, is you can summarize all of these as being. So tell me about this Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event, which I think is super interesting.
It is really interesting. So this is something that is starting up all over. People are doing it all over the country at different universities and different community groups. Asheville has done it a few years in a row, and it's been very successful.
Really?
Yes, and several places in Tennessee, Chattanooga, I believe Memphis. And so what we are asking is for men to put on heels and actually walk a mile to feel what it's like to walk a mile in a woman's shoes.
And men are willing to do this?
Surprisingly, yes. So
it's a lot of really big high heels.
It is a lot.
First of all.
Yes, it is a lot of really big high heels. So we do have a shoe company that is associated with the Walk a Mile program.
I was going to ask about that.
Yes, that supplies large men's sizes women's heels. And so we are ordering some from them. We're actually almost out, so if anyone's interested, they better swoop them up fast. And otherwise, we have different options for people in the community to find at different shoe stores up to a certain size.
And so do we find that this event really does breed empathy? Because I mean, ultimately that's what the object of the event is to put men literally in women's shoes in order to inspire sort of metaphorical understanding of what it's like to be a woman for a day.
Right.
Or a mile.
Right. So yeah, it's a very visual, very experiential kind of campaign. And so the idea is to recognize that in a very small scale way with the shoes, a much bigger issue that isn't funny. It's very serious, but it's a fun way to engage a community.
Well, what I love about the heels thing, I'm wearing 4-inch heels currently at the moment, and it takes some practice to be able to walk on these without falling on your face. But what it does is it makes you vulnerable.
Yes.
Being in high heels makes you physically vulnerable. You can't run.
Right.
Trying to maneuver, you step on the wrong way on a rock even,
Absolutely.
and suddenly you can roll your ankle. And so what I love about that is that it puts men in a physically vulnerable position, which I think for the most part they're not in.
Right. Right, and to experience the discomfort that sometimes comes with being a woman, just because you're a woman and there are these gender expectations of what you should be wearing, what you should be doing.
I have to be hot, therefore I have to wear these really obnoxious and uncomfortable footwear.
Right. So we will have a little practice, a little walk practice right before we do the walk.
Oh, that's good.
So that they can have some time to get used to the feel.
That's awesome. And so that is happening in conjunction. That's your kickoff event for the Take Back the Night.
It's actually the closing event.
That's the closing event.
It's the biggest event.
Biggest and closing event for Take Back the Night, and Take Back the Night in general is...
Yes, it is an international also campaign that many college campuses do to address the issue of sexual violence against women.
And so
violence in general.
What happens during the event? Is it like just one day? Is it a week long?
It's the week. So Tuesday through Thursday of that week, of the first week in April, we have events going on. So April 1st is the Candlelight Vigil that evening at 7 p.m. and that is at the Culp Cave patio. And that is honoring victims of sexual and relationship violence. And so we will have music and poetry and speak outs about that. And then afterwards there is a reception in the Culp with refreshments. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have the Clothesline Project, where people have an opportunity to write messages on T-shirts about either their experience or the experience of someone that they know, or just their feelings about the issue.
And where will the clotheslines be?
They will be in the pedestrian mall. And so we'll have clotheslines hung up, and we will hang the T-shirts as another visual campaign. So those will be up Tuesday through Thursday in the pedestrian mall. And then on Thursday, we have the big Walk a Mile at 6 p.m. starting at the Cave patio.
That's so exciting.
Yes, and it's very exciting.
These events I feel like have gotten bigger over the last few years. I mean, we've been working on these on campus for a while. Definitely since I've been here.
Yes, so the Vigil and the Clothesline Project have grown, and what was really happening with the 5K is it became really big, and then many other 5Ks came into the community, and we had to sort of compete with those, and so it became less successful. And we also realized that the issue with the 5K was we had all these wonderful community members who supported the cause, but beyond being in the 5K, in no way did it really translate to any effect on campus after the event. So the reason we're doing Walk a Mile is because male leadership is so important in addressing this issue. And a lot of times when we talk about things like gender violence and gender issues, automatically our brains go to women's issues.
And women have to own their responsibility in all of this, which
and sometimes men just turn off because they're like, this isn't my issue, so it's not my.
So we're looking forward to these events at the beginning of April.
Yes.
And so if we are in a situation where we need relationship counseling or advice or information or whatever else, we can come see in the counseling center, 3rd floor of the Culp.
Yes, Oasis at etsu.edu, or you can contact the counseling center, and we will help you in any way that we can.
That's awesome. We will be back with Max from FMLA.